Misinformation is information that you're sharing that is false, but disinformation is information that you're sharing that's been created with the purpose of disinforming people. Whenever we see something that disagrees with us, it's immediately the enemy, right? It's something that needs to be discarded, mocked, etc. We in the media, we're not perfect. It can happen that we make mistakes. It can happen that our source was not telling the truth. It can happen that we thought that something was true and then, as it turns out, it wasn't. If you're not prepared to sort out what's true from what's not, it's really hard to see what reality you're living in. If we took the time to talk to one another, we would realize that we actually share many beliefs, and the fact that we agree to disagree doesn't mean that the other person is a monster.
All right, welcome everyone. We're back here today again, and Jill Collins Connections. I have one of my nearest and dearest friends. He's not that near right now. He's actually in Madrid, Spain. But Adrian Bono is an amazing man. He is absolutely one of my favorite people on the planet. And we've gotten to know each other over the years, living in Buenos Aires at the same time. We're no longer in Buenos Aires, or at least I'm not at the moment, but he's in Madrid now. And so super excited to have him. I want to tell you a little bit about him first. He is a seasoned journalist for the past 15 years. He's worked as a political reporter in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and abroad. But in Buenos Aires, he was with Infodemic, as well as the Buenos Aires Herald. The unique perspective he has, though, is in a Spanish-speaking country, he actually has founded 2 online English publications. In addition, he's contributed to numerous publications, including The Guardian, The Monocle, and his opinions have been featured in Al Jazeera, CNN, and the BBC. In 2020, a few years ago, during the pandemic, he moved back to Madrid, Spain, where he's been working as a consultant. He recently launched another newsletter in Spain focusing on Spanish politics, and it's called the Tapa. He has a bachelor's degree in social sciences and humanities, as well as a master's degree in fact-checking, digital verification, and data journalism. So his specialty is media and disinformation. And this is what we're going to talk about today. This is what I love about him, is really making people aware of what's happening in society, why we are listening to things we're listening to, this 24-hour news cycle, how we live in fear, a lot of us, because we're constantly listening to the news and everything is breaking news and we're all getting scared and we're all freaking out, like what's going to happen? Is the world ending? And so I really want to share his insights with you today so you can get a little bit more information and maybe think a little bit differently after this interview. So welcome, Adrian. Welcome to my show. So glad you're here.
Thank you, Jill. I am very happy to be with you today. I'm at a loss for words after such an incredible introduction. I also want to say that you are one of my favorite people in the world. I admire you and I love you, and I am very happy to finally be doing this.
Thank you. Thank you. We tried to do this while we were both in Buenos Aires a few months ago, and we just couldn't make it work. And saying I'm going to get back to Madrid. I was there actually a year ago around this time visiting you. And so I have to get back there maybe next month and visit again.
I was going to say, it's about time that you get back to Madrid.
It's about time. It's about time. Yeah. As much as you're from Mallorca, which is absolutely one of my favorite places on the planet. So maybe we can rendezvous there even. But
I wouldn't object to that. So yes. Let's do it, please.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. Yeah, I will. We will do that. So tell me a little bit about things. I tend to be a little bit of an optimist. And so I don't always subscribe to conspiracy theories. And I honestly have to tell you, I don't watch the news all the time because of this very reason, is how things tend to be just more of the same, or opinions. And, I was born and grew up in the days of the Walter Cronkites and this kind of thing, where you just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. And you had to base your own opinions. And today news is so different in that it's all opinion based. And how do we know how do we know what's true? Where do we start with that?
I guess that the first question that you would start with is, what is the truth? And unfortunately, we're living in a time that it's called by scholars the post-truth era, right? Where the truth is basically anything you want it to be, right? Or if you want a more specific definition, is something that whatever your feelings tell you the truth is, right? So I guess that the first question would be, what is the truth? And I guess it depends on who you're listening to. It's funny because I when I was in journalism school, when I was in my early 20s, I remember I studied journalism in Argentina, right? And Argentina didn't have Walter Cronkite, there wasn't this golden era of journalism that the US had, but we still strived to be like that. We still, in Argentina, people still, and the journalistic community still had those people that you would look up to from the 60s, 70s, and 80s and try to aspire to be them someday, right? Like even in the English speaking community, Argentina had a really bad dictatorship between 1976 and 1983, where 3,000 people were forcefully disappeared. And the editor-in-chief of the Buenos Aires Herald, which was a very little newspaper, like little red newspaper back then, that because it was in English, not many people in Argentina read, ended up becoming the publication that was the first to denounce that these crimes were being committed, right? These were the people that we looked up to, that we wanted to be. But unfortunately, that era doesn't exist anymore. And things have changed so much. Technology has changed so much. The way that we communicate with each other, the way that we relate to each other, and the way that we consume information has changed so much that it's impossible to go back to that. It just doesn't exist anymore. So now we are all living within our own echo chambers. We only listen to journalists or the media that we know beforehand agrees with us politically. And this is causing us to be more and more used to only getting the information that we want to get. And when something disagrees with our perception of the world, politically, etc., then we immediately reject it as something that is, as you said at the beginning, fake news. So I guess that it's also important to understand what fake news is. Like in academia, people try to avoid using the term fake news. We try to either use disinformation or misinformation, but because fake news has become so many different things. Originally, maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when everybody was on Facebook, you would come across an article from a website that you didn't know what that website was, with a story that was obviously false. People didn't know that it was false or that it was fake, and that you would share it. So originally that was fake news. But then after 2016, fake news became a completely different term when President Donald Trump started using it as a way to describe media that portrayed him in an unflattering way. So he disagreed with, so he didn't like it, and he started calling it fake news. And then, and just to be clear, this is not something that happens politically in the US or with Republicans or Democrats. This is happening everywhere. Here in Spain, when anyone from any political party sees something that they disagree with or they don't like it, they immediately say, oh, that's fake news. Just ignore it. So the whole term has come to redefine the way that the kind of information that we consume. And whenever you see, for example, an opinion piece, which is not facts, it's just opinion, you can't fact check. If I say this is good or bad, you can't fact check that. That's very subjective. So what you think is good, I may think is bad, and neither of us is right or wrong. It's just an opinion. So whenever you read an opinion piece from someone who criticizes your political party or your political or the political leader that you vote, and we call that fake news, that is incorrect. It's not fake news. It's just an opinion piece that we don't like. So to me, it's fascinating. It's one of the reasons why I started covering politics when I became a journalist. And then I would say in the last 7 to 8 years, I started shifting to just focus on the rise of disinformation and misinformation, which they sound similar, but they're different. And the difference is intent. So misinformation is information that you're sharing that is false. But disinformation is information that you're sharing that's been created with the purpose of confusing people or disinforming people. So when you say disinformation, you are talking about something that was specifically created to deceive you. Someone wrote that article, someone created that piece online, or edited that photograph or edited that video in order to make you think and feel something very specific. So that's disinformation. So whenever someone talks about disinformation campaigns, it means that an organization, it could be like a national or international organization or government, have created something specifically to make you think something very specific about something. Misinformation is maybe something that you believe to be true and you share it anyway, and it's false. This is where you saw a lot of misinformation during the COVID-19 vaccination processes, because there were many doctors with many different information or many different opinions, or people who just didn't really understand what they were talking about, and they were sharing something thinking that this information was correct when in fact it wasn't. So you would call that misinformation, right? So the difference is intent. And since the rise of social media, we have seen like information has become weaponized, right? A lot of people have noticed that by creating something and putting it online, even if it's false, if enough people retweet it or share it, be it on Facebook, WhatsApp, etc., then it can become a thing, even if it's not true. So in the last 15 years, we've seen a complete change of how information is shared. And this has obviously affected the media landscape as well, because we have had to catch up with that and find a way to make people see what is happening. This obviously doesn't mean that the media tells you what you need to believe in, but we are trying to raise awareness about, look, there's so much false information out there. You need to be very vigilant about how you consume information, who is sending it to you, is the source credible, etc. Because otherwise if you end up believing everything that you get in your WhatsApp, for example, you end up living in a parallel reality. And we're seeing this with many people nowadays. So it's very challenging as a journalist to try to raise awareness about this, because we're just not prepared. I've done it. I am prepared now, but this took me years, and I'm a journalist. So imagine someone who it's like anyone whose job is not to be informed. They just want to consume information, and they just want to open their browser and read what happened during the day. If you're not prepared to sort out what's true from what's not, it's really hard to see what reality you're living in. So I think it's very important to raise awareness about this.
But it is important to raise awareness, and I see what you're saying, because I think I took a hacking, what was it called again? Media and Society class in college years ago, and the guy who taught it, he wrote a book called Hacking College, and he told us, I remember the very first day, he sat down with took his flip-flops off and sat Indian style on the chair, and he said, okay, he's a PhD and he's 36 years old, and let me tell you, he goes, everybody is getting the same bit of information. They're all getting fed the same news story. And so you're not getting all the whole thing, the whole crux of what's really going on. And I think what's happening today is that we trust a certain outlet based on I think we're being bombarded with so much information that we almost have to put things in containers or boxes in our mind to categorize people or things or information. It's a litmus test. It's okay, that person is for this elected a politician, or this person likes this, it's for this cause. And we assume that we put them in a box. And so then they're the person who listens to that type of media, whether it be CNN, Fox, whatever it is in the US, and other places have similar ones. And so we end up separating as a society, and we're not unified. And then social media and other search engines, and with algorithms, even YouTube, they get to know us and they know what we want, and they'll feed us just that information or just those stories that align with what they think our beliefs are. And so we're only seeing one side of the story, is what I think I hear you saying too, is that if that's the case, then how can we possibly get the true story? And how do we, as the average person, you're a journalist, it took you years to figure it out. How can the average person watching this today say, how can I know what information I'm getting? And I'm afraid to share it if I get a story that I'm concerned about. How do I know it's true? Or how do I know where to go? What's a good media outlet? What are some places I can go so I can be accurate with what I'm learning?
Yeah, it's really hard to answer that question, because I think that the most important thing that we should all be doing now, and this should start in schools, is media literacy. This is extremely important. Some of the Nordic countries are already applying it. They are teaching kids how to sort out information on the internet, how to tell what's factual and what's fake. What are the different signs that you can pay attention to in order to just be critical of of the information that you're consuming. And this has been very successful. This has only obviously been applied in the last few years, but this has shown that children in those countries seem to be falling less and less for false stories online. And I just want to be very clear. Again, when I say disinformation and misinformation, we're talking about false stories, right? Things that never happened, or things that are being taken out of context, or that have been created for financial gain in order to confuse people. I'm not talking about an article by the New York Times that turned out to be false. There's a difference in that, and that is, we in the media, we're not perfect. We make mistakes. We obviously fact check, and we've been told to triple fact check whenever we're writing a story, but it can happen that we make mistakes. It can happen that our source was not telling the truth. It can happen that we thought that something was true, and then as it turns out, it wasn't. It just happens. It's the way that it is. We're all humans, and it's good journalistic practice to, when that happens, to acknowledge that we made a mistake, make the correction, and then make it clear that the information that we previously released was inaccurate. So I'm not talking about that. I am talking about false information that is being put out there in order to deceive and to confuse us, purposely confuse us. So these kids I think it's being applied in Denmark and Finland, if I'm not mistaken. And the way that like the latest tests are showing that teenagers and kids fall less and less for information that is not true, because they're being given the tools to evaluate whether this is something that could be false, could be true, checking the sources, checking the way that the information is presented. If it's an article, there are several signs that you should check in order to see whether the publication that you're reading is legitimate or it's just a blog that's been created for financial gain. Let's not forget that there's troll farms out there, and then there's also these blog farms where they create content just for clicks, and they create this sort of super engaging content with clickbaity headlines that they know that people are going to fall for, and they're going to share, and then eventually that's going to translate into eyeballs, which eventually translates into money. So
how do we know that? How can we know if we're looking at an article? Like if I have I told you I don't watch a lot of news, but say I see things like, usually it's when someone I know and trust says, hey, have you heard about this? And if it's impactful, if it's weather related, or it's something that's going to make a difference and move the needle, I need to know. But, or Apple News for my iPhone, maybe I'll swipe over there and look at that and see that. And these are reputable, supposedly a lot of them reputable news outlets. Can I just trust these outlets?
There are many ways. And the thing is that there's no magic solution where you're just like, oh, this is false, right?
Good. Al Jazeera is great. It's all good. Everyone, one outlet.
So we know the legacy brands, right? Like we know the New York Times, we know the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, etc. But then suddenly you come across with the Chattanooga Morning Daily, right? Which is something that you've never heard of. And it says, let's think of something outrageous, right? It says, President Joe Biden says he's an alien. And there are several ways for you to see whether that publication is believable or is legitimate. Usually the look and feel for the website, you feel that it's a little off. It doesn't really look professional. Many times there's no byline to the articles, so you don't know who's writing the articles. There's no about us section. There, you can tell that all the headlines are pretty clickbaity. They try to create some sort of emotional response on people. So they are not giving you the facts. They are telling you how to feel. And also when there's these ridiculous stories if it's the only one that has that story and it's a bombshell of a story, then maybe it's not a credible source. Usually, if there's a big story, even if it's a small newspaper that publishes it, we obviously can happen. The biggest newspapers in the country or in the world immediately echo that story. It's tricky to identify whether what you're reading is true, like if the website is real or not, if it's a legitimate news organization, or if it's just someone who created a blog who's just churning out content in order to create confusion or make money. But it's just an exercise that we should all be doing all the time. It's not easy. It's not simple. I think that I have a well-trained eye, and most of the times whenever I open a website, if it's false, I know immediately that it's false, but I keep falling for them sometimes. And I just have to go back and check again because sometimes I'm not sure, right? Or whenever you get on WhatsApp, I know that not many people in the US use WhatsApp, but any other source of information, and you get a screenshot of a story, right? And it says it's the New York Times, and then the headline says, Biden says he's an alien. And that starts getting shared like crazy. And a lot of people say, look, it's on the New York Times. So like, it's in the New York Times, so it's got to be true. But then, of course, it's just a fabrication. It's a false image, right? Somebody has edited that photo to make it look like it's the New York Times website, but in fact, it's just something that's been edited to look like it. And those were the challenges that we were facing 5 years ago. Now we're dealing with deepfakes and AI, and it's just becoming increasingly impossible to tell what's real from what's fake. I was talking to this guy who has a company in the Middle East the other day. Do you know Cameo? Have you heard of Cameo? No, the website Cameo. It's
I have. Yes, I have. That was from years ago, where you could get a greeting from someone famous and you paid them.
Yes.
Oh my
exactly.
God, that's still around. I was like,
that's
okay,
it.
band. All right, forget it.
I think it's still around. But this guy he used artificial intelligence to create something which is exactly the same as Cameo, but he creates voice recordings of these celebrities without actually having to work with the celebrities. So you want to get a birthday wish. What's that? Yeah,
there's an app, there's an AI tool called Descript that you can actually record someone else's voice and then put the text in and get that endorsement using anyone's.
That's audio. It. And it sounds so real and so believable. So this guy, he was making me listen to a message that someone sent to their, I believe it was their son, who loves Elon Musk. So they paid to get the fake AI Elon Musk send them a message. And it was just, if I hadn't known, I would just say, oh, that's Elon Musk. That's Elon Musk sending you a message. So what happens when suddenly next time we have a national election, this audio message starts going viral with one of the presidential candidates saying these outrageous things, and everybody listens to them and believes that happened for real. And in fact, it's just been created with artificial intelligence. So how do we stop that? How do you tell someone that is fake when that person is actually listening to the voice of the person say it? It's
very challenging. And I remember back in the day when we were hanging out, and you did a great talk at the American Club in Buenos Aires that time about fake news and disinformation. And the big thing then were the deep fakes, but it was the videos where it was always blurred out. You could barely see someone, but you heard their voice and you had to really dive in. Today, technology is so incredible that we can literally it's crazy what you can do today. So yeah, you're being aware of that. And how do you think that this is going to, I guess I'm wanting to direct a little bit to this people unsure, the 24-hour news culture, just watching all of this over and over again. There's only so much news out there. And how often should someone actually be watching news? Is there addiction? Do people have an addiction to news and watching it all day? And
I'm the worst person you can ask that, because I am a journalist and I'm addicted to news. So I'm watching the news still since I get out of bed in the morning until 2 a.m. every day. I am always very extremely connected, and I'm always getting updated, and I'm getting a million notifications on my phone about what's happening who said what, fire here, I don't know, presidential election there. It just doesn't stop. So I'm not the greatest person to ask that, but
actually you are the best person to ask that, because the fact that you do, how do you manage anxiety and reality and what goes on that way, or do you?
So I'm very used to it now, but I just don't think that if you are not a journalist, if you don't work with information and the need, if you don't have the need to be constantly updated for professional reasons, I'd say that watching the news like 1 hour a day, like at dinner or before you go to bed, I think that's enough. I also think that it's important that we mention how social media has impacted the way that we consume the news. 15, 20 years ago, you would go to a website, you would buy the newspaper, you would turn on the TV, watch the nightly news, and then you were done. Now we live in a time where we have our cell phones with us 24/7, where we are addicted to social media, where all we do is doom scrolling. I don't know if you know that term, but
tell us what it is.
doom scrolling is like when you just like when you go on Twitter, now it's called X, but when you would go on Twitter and it would just hit refresh all the time, and then you would just go down. So like you would scroll down all the news, and it's just like all bad news after the next. This is a term that was created during the pandemic where everything was bad news. And now, unfortunately, because of the way that we consume information, a lot of media companies need to have that sort of engaging content in order to make you click and go there and go to their website and read. So I think that we, in the latest study by Oxford University and Reuters, they do this sort of like yearly study on media consumption every year. And one of the big finds this year was that news consumption is dropping because there's like fatigue of just like bad news. People are just tired of getting bombarded of one bad, depressing story after the next. And I understand that. I think that it happens to me sometime. I don't think that it's the media you should blame entirely. I also think that, as you mentioned before, we should be blaming the algorithms. The algorithms will give us the sort of engaging emotional content that we crave. It happens to me whenever I go to Twitter or TikTok. Most of the times that I go to either of those two social media platforms, I notice that when I stop reading and move on to something else, I leave feeling depressed and bummed down. And this is because of the kind of stories that I am bombarded with. It's stories of racism, homophobia, corruption, violence. And then obviously it gets to you. It gets to a point where you're just like, especially with TikTok, I have to stop using it because I get annoyed. I say, I was having a great afternoon and suddenly I've been bombarded by, I've watched 15 videos, one after the next, of people hitting each other, yelling at each other, discriminating each other. And it just leaves me with a bad taste, right? So
it's really a matter of checking in with yourself. I love the hour you said there, and it can be even on social media, but it's this, I always am so self-aware is that when I'm doing something is, okay, I've been sitting in that chair too long, drinking my coffee, I've got to get moving because I'm starting to feel like there's a shift in my feelings about things in my life. It's like all of a sudden I'm not feeling off. And so when you just being aware of that, it's, whoa, if I'm on Instagram, do I feel good about it? And maybe it's, if you get on Instagram or what these other social media outlets, is maybe putting something out there that you want to see that's going to uplift you, or it's going to be interesting. And I love that you said too, that it's not entirely the media's fault, it's the algorithms, but I think too, it's really what we are drawn to. And I think as a society, when we start to change what it is that we want to, there's going to, the demand is going to drop, and people, and the what's covered is going to shift, because if the media consumption is dropping, then maybe they have to readdress. They're sitting around the boardroom tables trying to figure out what do we cover instead, because we're losing audience.
Agreed.
Yeah,
I completely agree with you. I think that the issue is that we are drawn to that content, and we without noticing, and this happens to me too, so it happens to all of us. Without noticing, we become a part of this downward spiral, where we just keep going back for more and more. And then the more we want, the more we are fed that by the algorithm. I noticed, for example, on YouTube. So I use YouTube a lot for work. TikTok, Instagram, it's like scrolling, right? But I don't use TikTok videos or Instagram posts as sources of information for an article that I'm writing. However, I do use a lot of videos from YouTube. YouTube has now assumed, because I look them up a lot, that I am a flat earther, that I love the far, and that I'm crazy about conspiracy theories. And of course, I'm neither of those things, but YouTube thinks that I am, because I keep looking those things up for writing articles. So imagine if you are, there's a very interesting experiment that was done a few years ago here in Spain. This was something that El País, which is the #1 newspaper in Spain, did. And they just, they bought this computer, they created this new YouTube account. So like it had never been used, there was no user history, there was no browser history, anything. Create this account, and then they played one video, they looked something up, and I believe it was the moon landing. And then they just said, when you finish watching a video on YouTube, and then
suggest another one.
You suggest another one, right? So like you can either, it just stops there, or then it suggests another one, and then there's autoplay. Okay. So they just selected that first video, and then they just left it on autoplay. So like the algorithm would choose something for you. And I believe that in only a matter of hours, the algorithm ended up, without touching anything, and the only thing that they looked up was the moon landing. I believe that in just a few hours, the algorithm ended up recommending flat Earth videos, and how you were being lied to. The Earth is not round, it's just flat. There's this wide conspiracy with the moon landing, etc. So it's very easy to go down that rabbit hole, because the algorithm is feeding you this information. And unless you are very aware that the content that you're being fed is something that the algorithm wants you to watch, it's easy to understand why a lot of people fall for it, and why so many people these days believe these conspiracy theories, because they fall down that hole, and then they just keep consuming information that reinforces that initial belief. So it's really hard to fight against that, because to that person, everyone is talking about this, and everyone is saying that this is true. So why shouldn't it? You know? You're not really getting, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's really like having intentional media consumption. It's like being intentional about what we're doing. And I was studying, I just did an interview with a cool guy, Sam Led, who's an expert in ADHD a few weeks ago. And after it, I was prepping and looking at different like titles and checking things out of what would be interesting. And I was researching it. And ever since then, I get so many cool things on ADHD recommended. And there's a great comedian now, and I'm like, oh my God, this guy's hilarious. But it's like, it takes you in a direction. And I can attest to that, some of my viral videos, because I did one on with a sex and intimacy coach. The transcript in YouTube actually YouTube gets every word, and then it will suggest my video in all my videos, not just that one, to those that it thinks that my channel has something to do with that. So I've been getting on, like the one I interviewed with Liana, videos that were about sex were going to Liana, to this Liana video. It's really tricky how you have to, I'm learning a lot of tagging and checking the transcript, making sure words are in there properly, because YouTube's doing its best, but it is a computer, it is an algorithm. And I think a lot of times they will keep going in a direction, trying to figure out, as a coach that I have, Evan Carmichael, says about YouTube, he says, YouTube is trying to figure out what your channel's about. And it's trying to figure out who your audience is. And so it goes the other way. The audience is trying to figure out what your interests are, which is helpful on some level. At the same time, it can take us in the wrong direction. So it really takes this intentionality of saying, wow, okay, I don't have autoplay on mine, as much as I would love my viewers to have autoplay on. So hopefully it plays the next video of mine after this one. But at the same time, I don't do autoplay, because I want to choose and I want to go back, and I don't always just go and say, oh, what else is it? I will actually hit the arrow at the top and go back to my original search and keep going and not getting down that chase down that little rabbit trail and chase a squirrel of something totally off topic. But yeah, YouTube is a great resource for information. It's fantastic. It's it's the second largest searchable database outside of Google to get data. And so I think it's really helpful. That brings me to, it's great.
But just like in real life, there's good information and there's damaging information. And yes, the algorithm will feed you what it thinks you want. But then at the same time, it's important that we're all aware about this, or that we're all aware of this, and that whenever we're picking something else to watch, we keep this in mind. And I go back to what I said earlier about media literacy. This is media literacy. Understanding this is one of the things that you need to keep in mind whenever you're reading something, watching something, listening to something. Is this something that is good information, or am I just being fed this video or this podcast or this article because the algorithm thinks that I want to read this? And there's still a lot of work to do in that area. As I said, this is not even something that's being discussed in schools. At the same time, it's very important to communicate what media literacy is the right way, because I'm sure that lots of people, lots of parents will think that this is somehow ideologically charged, that it is something that will benefit like a political party, etc. But this has nothing to do with ideology. This is simply, okay, how do I know whether this article that I'm reading comes from someone who's trying to make money with it or from a reputable media company? Mm-hmm. That's it. That's what we need to know. There's no ideology here, has nothing to do with ideology. It's just making sure that the information you're about to consume is healthy and good for you, rather than something that someone created in order to make you feel bad or vote a certain way, et cetera, et cetera.
I love that. So it's noticing those cues is like, how can things that make us feel bad and make us, anxious or something like that, and makes us either vote a certain way or think a certain way. And so we have to wake up a little bit and be aware of what it is we're consuming, and not just accept what, kick back and let it just wash over us. We've really got to be alert. And what comes to mind too is thinking of things like that movie recently, Sound of Freedom, and other things, is that there's this controversy, is it's dividing people, because here we get this thing where someone says it's a great movie and the other one says, oh my gosh, there's a big conspiracy behind it. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I have some background understanding of this movie and the people that are involved. But I will tell you that there's so much hate and just trashing of each other, of sides, and just people are just not even connecting. And we just need to be more responsible in that, maybe understanding and maybe accepting and saying, you know what, this isn't for me. This maybe not be my story or something I'm interested in, but I don't necessarily have to go take a position or get on my soapbox about it and make a big stink about something.
I agree.
That's one thing. Yeah. And so how can the consumer of media, how can we help the media do a better job for us, so that we are getting better information and that you're able to do your job better?
That is a fantastic question, and I actually appreciate that you asked that. I unfortunately, as a journalist, I have seen trust in the media decrease in the last 10 to 15 years. Sometimes I understand why some people are losing faith in the media or journalists or journalism as a whole. There is an explanation as to why the quality of the media has decreased in the last 10 to 15 years. Obviously, there's many factors that need to be taken into consideration, but with the arrival of the internet, had a very big impact on how we consumed information. You suddenly, rather than going to the corner kiosk to buy a newspaper, you had that same content free on the internet. So why would I pay for a newspaper when I could read it free on my computer? The arrival or the appearance of websites such as Craigslist killed the classifieds model, because suddenly you could go on Craigslist and post something for free, and you didn't have to pay the crazy prices that you would have to pay to get something published in a newspaper. So all these little things that I think that usually people fail to remember or to identify, we're responsible for making the media industry a lot smaller. Suddenly, if I was a newspaper and I was making 100 in a matter of 10 years, I was just making 25, right? And that obviously has an impact on the quality of the journalism. You can't afford to pay for investigative journalism. You can't afford to pay for more journalists. And this is one of the reasons why you would see that many outlets, the quality in many outlets decreased. If you add the impact that Twitter and Facebook had on how you consumed information, because people just stopped going to the homepages altogether, they would just scroll. And then if an article that they were interested in popped up, they would click on it. But that's it. Now, suddenly we depended on whether our content was featured on Twitter or Facebook. And if it was, maybe we were lucky, maybe we weren't, maybe people would click on it, maybe people wouldn't. So it became this sort of war to become appealing to readers. And that's when clickbait headlines appear. The sort of headline that I hate, which is, "You will never believe what Jill Collins said during an episode of her show." And then you had to click on that in order to find out what Jill Collins said, rather than just giving it to you straight as you would read in a newspaper. That also, I believe, decreased the quality of journalism greatly.
Yeah, because clickbait is actually just it's creating controversy. It's creating this sense of, it's like looking at a train wreck or a car wreck as you're going by, as we just like, it's what has happened, and you just want to watch the wreck. It's
exactly.
Like, it's not really.
That's what it is. So I fortunately, in the last, I would say 7 years, because I think that it was after 2016 when it finally started, like we started seeing some steady growth, was that people started realizing that maybe I should pay for a subscription to my favorite newspaper, to my favorite publication. And maybe if we all paid, then we would get better quality journalism. So that's changing. I believe that we still have years to go, because yes, people will pay for the New York Times, but people will not pay for your local town newspaper, at least not yet. Why? Because the quality of that newspaper is not going to be as good as the quality that the New York Times can get. So that's a different conversation, because then should we support our local media? Should we support our small town newspaper? If that dies, who covers what's happening in that small town? Is it going to be the New York Times? How are they going to do it? So I think that that's a different conversation. I really do believe that it's like a chicken and egg thing, because people say, I will only start paying when the quality of this newspaper gets better. And the newspaper says, we can only get better when you start paying. So who's going to do it first? And then there's another tricky part on top of that, which is, okay, let's take the New York Times. The New York Times is getting more and more subscribers every day. They're growing. They're making a decent amount of money considering the kind of company they are. However, whenever the New York Times publishes something that doesn't resonate with many of the readers, whenever they publish something that maybe is letting someone who doesn't agree politically with the New York Times share their mind or speak their mind or write an op-ed, etc., people start threatening to cancel their subscriptions. If you publish this person, I will no longer pay for the New York Times. Unfortunately, that belief reinforces the silo that we were talking about at the beginning, which is, I only want to get the news that I agree with. And if you provide someone I disagree with a platform to speak their mind, I will no longer pay for your publication. Like, I will not pay for subscription. So we have become so used to only being exposed to the information that we agree with, that whenever we suddenly see someone from the other side politically, be Democrat, Republican, whatever country we're talking about, and we read something from that person that's on the other side in my newspaper, then I get upset, because I don't want to be exposed to that information.
Wow.
And that is really bad.
That is really bad. And boy, that is an eye opener. I haven't even thought of it that way before, because what that's actually doing is it's watering down the information we are getting. And that brings me to my next thought, is really what you and I have had, obviously, the pleasure, the privilege of living in another country, other countries, plural. And my first, time was being outside of the country and living outside the country 13 years ago. And I was amazed. And I think those who travel even and turn on the news and check out the news in other countries, and you go in your hotel or wherever you are and you start watching news, that's happening. I never knew about that. I learned very quickly that, and I'm going to make a very controversial statement here, but I think the US is probably one of the most censored societies in the world, the countries in the world, in terms of our media. We don't realize that. We think we're a free country and we have free media and free press, free speech. But there is so much we're not hearing. And it's not because it's necessarily being censored. It's because we don't give a shit about it, what's happening outside of our country a lot of times. I think that's what happens, is that we don't always care. We're more concerned what's happening, if our potholes are being fixed on our roads, if our trash is being picked up, if life is going as normal for us, because we've never really experienced, really before the pandemic, probably more so than now, anything that has affected us outside globally with our daily lives, and like other countries, and like Europe being so tight, and other countries that have had to deal with being aware of what's going on in the world. And so I say all that to say is that the media here will briefly touch on it. The nightly news, you might hear something that's happening in another country. Someone was killed, this thing happened, an earthquake, and then they move on to other issues that are more local. And I think it's up to us to decide, is that what we want to hear? Do we want to be more globally aware? Do we want to be more aware of things outside of our small circle? And then ask for that, and seek those articles, and seek a collective as a body to find that information, because we're not getting that here.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because last Sunday, 2 days ago, Spain had a national election where people went to the polls to elect the next prime minister. And there was some really good coverage from the New York Times, and there were several articles on their homepage on Sunday. And I don't recall exactly which one it was, because I read several, but there was one that was detailing who the candidates were and what they proposed, etc. And lots of readers, I was very disappointed, because lots of readers were just commenting, since when do we care about Spain? Or like, why do we care about this? Like, the economy of Spain, there was a guy who said something like, the economy of Idaho is bigger than the economy of Spain, so why do we care? And of course, there was the usual bickering, right? That's, oh my God, don't be so obtuse. You need to read about what's happening like somewhere else in the world, not just the US, etc. But I guess that I don't think that's just a US thing. I think that we are also very insulated when it comes to reading international news. I think that it's probably because it's harder to understand. You need to have a lot of context information in order to understand what's happening in a country that you don't really know or understand. But I do think that we in the media should do a better job at covering what's happening in different places in the world. Going back to what I was saying before, of course, a lot of it is due to budget reasons or lack of a budget.
Yeah, because the budget thing, I'll go into that, is that I found myself, and you've helped me today to understand, to think this through, is that I was in Apple News, I saw an article, I'm like, oh, I want to read that. So I clicked on it, it was New York Times or Washington Post or one of those. And I think I have a $1 subscription with them because I read too many articles. If you read more than a couple articles, you pay or something. And so I get the $1 a month paying on my credit card. But there was one, and I was like, oh, I didn't renew that. And I could only read so far. And I went, oh, never mind, I'll just Google it and I'll find it somewhere else. And I did.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so, but then I did find it somewhere else, but that wasn't really, so thinking about that, people are going to say, why not? It's free. I get it. Yeah. But maybe there's a different perspective, and maybe there's a way that we can somehow support the media outlets. Maybe it's journalists. Maybe it's that I want to go into independent journalism in a second on that, now that I think about it, but finding those articles that are important and relevant, and supporting and paying for something we're actually consuming. You know, we need to support things that we are consuming, even though we're in a society where we can get so much for free. We have to look at the quality of what we're getting for that.
Absolutely.
For that free price tag, because
absolutely,
it's sometimes nothing's for free. And so if we are getting free content, is it to entice us to actually subscribe, which is okay. Is it, oh, it's from a media outlet or from a place that someone wants to just get us riled up and excited or upset about something, like you were saying? Is it a way to bash the opposition? So it's deciding and being very literal about what we do, and the ultimate goal, I think, is just to not create separation and to find a way to find, because I think we're more alike than we're more similar than we are dissimilar as a human being, a human.
Of course.
And we have created so many ways to be separate and to
of course
ways to hate one another. And I think the media has such an opportunity, and we have an opportunity to work with the media to find ways that we can all collectively come together on things we agree, and then just sometimes agree to disagree, which isn't popular today, but to agree to disagree and let it go. And if it's something that's not going to impact us in our daily lives, like I have a family member that'll call me and say, "You have to know what's going on. You have to know this is happening." And it's like, why? Do I have to know that this person's son is going somewhere and this happened? And what is that going to do with my life? Why do I need to know that?
Yeah.
I'm to stay on top of that information. I have way too many ways I want to support and change the world and do things that are good. And I don't need to spend time finding out what the latest is on that. So you said it's like what is it called again?
Doomscrolling.
Doomscrolling. Oh, wow. Yeah. So I think that's really an interesting point of view.
I completely agree with what you just said. I think that it's important to remember that we are not so different. I believe that, unfortunately, again, because of how we use social media and because we live in our little silos where nothing that disagrees with our thinking permeates those silos. We're only exposed to the beliefs and the political ideas that people that we agree with share with us. And whenever we see something that disagrees with us, it's immediately the enemy, right? It's something that needs to be discarded, mocked, etc. And if we took the time to talk to one another, we would realize that we actually share many beliefs, and the fact that we disagree, agree to disagree, doesn't mean that the other person is a monster. I just think that living with that perception, as we do these days, is part of what makes us all so polarized. Right? You can see that we just keep moving to the extremes more and more. And that's because we have a perception of the other that is just not real. It's just something that we've created because of how we move ourselves in social media. And also, and this is also true, the media sometimes, in this desperate effort to get readers, to get eyeballs, etc., focuses on the extremes, presents the extremes as, look at what the side you hate is doing. And they may take a story that is just an extreme person, just to give you an idea of how sometimes this happens in Argentina, for example. I have had arguments with friends who say, I hate those feminists, right? Like the feminists who go out and march in the streets of Buenos Aires, I hate them. And I'm like, why do you hate them? And look at them, they're like burning stuff down. They broke into a church and they destroyed statue of Jesus, and they were graffitiing. And I was like, okay, but yes, those things are obviously not okay. But those people do not represent the other 99.9% of the feminists who were marching on the streets, who didn't break anything. And they were marching peacefully. But what happens is that we, the media, again, we are guilty of this. We focus on that 0.1% that just did not behave peacefully. And then that creates the perception that everyone was behaving like that, right? And then the same thing happens on the other side. It's so unless we understand, and again, this is all part of what I said at the beginning, which is media literacy. It's understanding these things. Once you understand this, you're like, maybe things are not the way I think they are.
There's something that happens too. I think you're talking about Argentina and living there for so many years, and then hearing people that are there that were afraid to send their kids to the US because of the school shootings. They said, my kids are going to get shot. Now, I'm using this as an example. I'm not discrediting or don't have an opinion one way or another on this. I'm just saying that you get one snippet of a story And suddenly a society, another country thinks that if they go to the US, they're going to be shot. And it's
Absolutely.
the numbers of probably the percentages of people that are living in the US or in the US at any in this country at any given time versus the number of people that are shot. It's just whatever.
Of course.
But yet we see this snapshot. Or people will say to me, if I'm in Argentina and they're in the US or somewhere else in the world, they'll say, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" "Oh, we just saw on the news, there's this protest in Buenos Aires." And I'm like, "Really? Oh, okay." So this is the focus. And so we get these little snapshots. And so it's that perception of what we think things are about based on that little tiny postage stamp of a piece, of a little snippet. And we have to remember there's a whole bigger picture. When you're taking a picture of a beautiful landscape, there's all of this other stuff that you're not seeing when you share that picture with somebody. So
100%.
when I think too, what you said about the people that were burnt, the feminists that were doing that, is that we can also question ourselves and question those thoughts and say, do I hate feminists, or do I just not like that group that was doing that and their behavior? I dislike their behavior. I don't hate that entire or that group.
No, and consider the people that you're not seeing, right? Everyone else that you did not see. Consider them. How do they are they represented by this thing that you're seeing? And in many cases, it's not. They're not. But we're just so used to being sold that by social media and the media sometimes that it's hard to remember that.
Yeah.
So this is why media literacy is important.
Media literacy is so important. And I think that this is the whole point, is from a psychological standpoint, from our mental health standpoint today. The main thing I want to really hone in on here is just don't let media, social media, whatever aspect, whether it's true or fake or disinformation, misinformation, affect how you are and who you are as a person and how you show up in the world. If it's affecting how you feel about life, your mental health, take a break, find another outlet, find something that's going to lift you up, and find somewhere that you can go to, a different outlet, read some things, watch cat videos, whatever you got to do, it's time. It's going to make you happy, because I think we get so charged up with that. And I just see people in such stress, and it is so much anxiety. And people are telling me the sky's falling literally in their worlds. And it's so many things out of their control that they're focusing on. And it's tragic to me. It breaks my heart to see people who are just their lives are directed, and how they feel and wake up every day is based on all the information, whether it be true or not. I
agree.
Yeah, go ahead.
They call it doom scrolling for a reason, right? It takes you to a place that is not a great place. So I think it's important to keep this in mind, to be aware of this. And the second you feel that it's not good for you, just stop. Put the phone down and do something else. Watch cat videos, as you said. But when you start feeling like it's affecting your mental health, like it's making you sad, stop. Because then in the long run, being sad all the time really does affect you and your mental health. So,
and others around you, and others around you.
And those around you.
And then there's our society. And then that's my whole focus, is for everybody, for Argentina, for the world as a whole, for the United States, for everyone, Spain, for everyone to just somehow see a future in a different way, and not that it's gloom and doom, and that there is hope, and that there is a possibility for unity and peace and solidarity. And I know I'm a Pollyanna, but that's my prayer every day and my goal. I have one more controversial question for you. Thinking it's not always controversial, but this is just for thought. The pandemic, when we were in Argentina at the time, and I remember in March, I think March of 2020, we said, okay, tomorrow night, it's going to be like midnight, you can 6 p.m. lockdown. And we're like, really? For 2 weeks? We're like, no way.
Oh my God, 2 weeks. That's crazy.
Crazy? They can't make us do that, can they? Okay.
And they could.
Argentina was the poster child for this situation. And that 7 months we were still in lockdown, and what felt like house arrest. I was there for a few months of that. And we couldn't even go more than 5 blocks without being checked, or IDs checked on the street. And you could only go to the grocery store or the pharmacy. Good times, right? And I think we did finally have a party a year later at my place, and everybody celebrated, and it was fun. But we missed everybody so much. It was like Zoom videos, and oh my God, I was celebrating my birthday on Zoom. By the way, just sidebar, we have had a lot of good parties at my place in Buenos Aires, and I miss those. We
did.
We did. Good times. But what do you think that this was one of those few things in history that I'm aware of that the entire world was affected by one thing, just the entire world. That's monumental to me, if that's true. And then the second question, part of that is, do you think the media played a part in how long the pandemic lasted, in the sense, I know that how long it lasted, because it seemed like it was a thing and then almost all of a sudden it wasn't a thing.
Right.
That's the controversial question.
I think, look, obviously I can speak for the media is not a monolith, right? Yes, we are this industry that we do the same thing, but at the same time, each media company is run differently by different people. I do know that some people think that every morning we all call each other on Zoom and decide what the agenda is going to be so that we can run the world. I wish it were that simple. It's not. We have no communication between each other. Usually we compete with each other, so we're not going to let the other media outlets know what we're going to cover. I am not the kind of person who will say that there was this sort of conspiracy between the media and the government to extend the lockdown for X amount of time, etc. I think that, at least personally, I can tell you how it was personally. I think that we were all trying to do our best, when at the same time we all felt we had no idea what we were doing, right? We were facing something that was like nothing similar had happened in the last 100 years. We were all trying to wing it. We were looking around us to see what everyone else was doing and trying to do things the best way possible. Was there journalistic malpractice? Of course there was. Yes. There were many journalists who didn't do their job the right way, who maybe because of political interests, etc., they would just repeat whatever a government said or a political leader said. But I think personally, and I believe that a lot of people did this, what we did was we were trying to inform people as much as we could with the kind of information that we had. And we were trying to do so responsibly, because there's a term that was coined during the first months of the pandemic, which was, I think it was created by the WHO, and it was infodemic. There was so
Infodemic?
Yeah, infodemic. There was so much information, and everyone was so desperate about consuming information about the pandemic, about COVID, from where it came from to what the WHO is trying to do, like how long the lockdown is. Like everyone was consuming information. But there was so much disinformation, so much misinformation. No one knew what to believe. Fact checkers were trying to do their best and they failed sometimes. But I really do think that at the end of the day, we were trying to do what we could. For example, some newspapers decided that whatever content related to the pandemic was not going to be behind a paywall. So if you were not paying to read that newspaper online, you could still access those articles and get informed. I think that, did we fail many times? Yes, of course. Did we try to do our best? Yes. Was there, or were there any journalists or media companies that were purposely not telling the truth? Also, yes.
Yeah.
But again, just because one does it, I think unfortunately, that's the problem these days, right? You screw up once, and that is considered evidence of how the media is part of this vast conspiracy to lie to people. And then again, people fail to remember that we journalists are human and that we can fail. If you misinform, again, remember the difference between misinform and disinform. If you misinform by mistake, obviously, if you're misinforming people, it's because you think you're telling the truth, but in fact, you're providing them with false information. That then you correct the information, you apologize. But that doesn't mean that you're trying to, or that you're conspiring against the population by sharing false information. There's a very big difference, which is intent, right? I've made mistakes as journalists in the past. I have written things that were inaccurate, and then I had to correct them and write a note in the article saying, originally I said this, but as it turns out, this was wrong. It was these things happen. That's not evidence of this grand conspiracy in the media to control the population, which is unfortunately the kind of narrative that you see sometimes in social media.
Yeah.
But
it's not a conspiracy. I think the conspiracy theorists would think that's the case, and I think it's an interesting point of view. Wrapping up, I would love to ask one more question. If there's one thing that as consumers of media, the world society, we're not seeing that we need to be seeing, what is it that you'd say, gosh, if only people knew how to access about what's happening, this issue in the world, or would just do fill in the blank, what would that be? Something you would say if you could just give someone one thing that you wish they would do to make this
one thing that the media would cover
that the people could do. If you said if people would just read this, follow this, change this type of behavior, something
I hate to sound like a broken record, but if we all learned about media literacy, if we all understood what it means and the different tools that you have in order to put it into practice, I think that the situation around the world would improve vastly. But then, of course, maybe I'm being idealistic because it's not something that would happen overnight. But if all the countries in the world and the media itself also they agree to raise awareness about this, then I think that within a few decades, things would change significantly and improve for the better. I also think that it's important to raise awareness about the kind of negative effects that social media has on our brains. I could be wrong, but I think that maybe like in 60 or 70 years, when we look back to the 2010s, the 2020s, and see how we all knew that social media was not good for us, and we were still consuming it every single day like crazy. I think that people in 2080, 2090 are going to go like, how is this possible? How are they doing this knowing that the kind of effect that these things had on their brains, and they were still just like consuming it nonstop? So that's the other thing that I think would be important to raise awareness about. It's like, how bad consuming social media nonstop is for our brains.
I love that. And it's a great way to close because, I think that, like you said, is the media literacy and I could hear someone say, what's in it for me? Why would I want to do that? I think it creates, again, mental wellness, mental health we're getting better information. We're getting more laser focused. It's knowing what it is and not just having this open wide net that everything that shows up, I'm going to just take in and consume. It's like eating junk food. Like our bodies are going to be huge. We're going to be unhealthy. It's really
Absolutely.
just what is my day? It's almost like a diet plan. What's my diet plan? What am I going to do each day? What's my regimen that I'm going to follow? And I'm going to just consciously choose the media I want to consume and the things I want to follow for my own health. And then you're actually showing that as an example to future generations on how to do it. And then the media will shift. And this is that chicken egg thing. And then also, it's really, social media is something that, as much as we love it, it is, again, it's that just, we go numb. We really get, hours can go by and we go, wow, I was just sitting there for 3 hours and I was looking at this stuff and I don't even know what happened. It's waking up and realizing and being conscious of what we're looking at and consuming. And so many other ways, I'm talking to myself now, so many other ways to spend time on focusing on things that bring me joy, pleasure, excitement, spending time with people that I love versus wasting time just being numb to what shows up on my screen or in my feeds. So
we need to be present. We need to be present in life.
Be present. Be present. And I need to be present to get a flight booked so I can come see you. So excited.
Please.
You and Christian.
Please.
Yes. And I can't wait. And
we'll be waiting for you here.
In Buenos Aires, maybe too. I'll be back there in November. So come visit.
Maybe I'll go visit there.
Yay.
Maybe we can throw a party or something.
Oh,
like the good old days.
Do we have parties in Buenos Aires? I don't know. Maybe.
Maybe.
I'll host Casa. I love it. So miss you. Gosh, I miss you. So much fun.
I miss you too. I love you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for doing this.
My pleasure.
I had a great time. I can finally say that I've been a guest on your show. I can cross it off my bucket list. Thank you for inviting me.
Bucket list, he just had to do it. It was that one last thing. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it today, and please like, share, and subscribe, and leave some comments. Tell me what you liked about this and what you want to hear more of. Do you want more of Adrian? Because we can actually have him back. Maybe we should have him back and talk about some other cool stuff, like maybe politics.
I'll be happy to.
Politics and what's going on. Dive a little deeper, get a little more controversial, and get some people that'll support that idea. So let us know, okay? All right, we'll see you next time on Jill Collins Connections. Stay connected, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.